So this afternoon we're going to start on Book 7, Canto 3, the entry into the inner countries. Savitri has realized that in order for her to find and unite with her soul, she has to push aside the outer nature self, the evolutionary self, the inferior nature born into ignorance. Still took too large a place. It veiled herself and must be pushed aside to find her soul. Canto 3, the entry into the inner countries. At first, out of the busy hum of mind, as if from a loud thronged market into a cave, by an inward moment's magic she had come. A stark, hushed emptiness became herself. Her mind, unvisited by the voice of thought, stared at a void deep's dumb infinity. Her heights receded, her depths behind her closed, all fled away from her and left her blank. But when she came back to herself of thought, once more she was a human thing on earth, a lump of matter, a house of closed sight, a mind compelled to think out ignorance, a life force pressed into a camp of works, and the material world her limiting field. Amazed, like one unknowing, she sought her way out of the tangle of man's ignorant past that took the surface person for the soul. Then a voice spoke that dwelt on secret heights. For man thou seekst, not for thyself alone. Only if God assumes the human mind and puts on mortal ignorance for his cloak and makes himself the dwarf with triple stride, can he help man to grow into the God. As man disguised, the cosmic greatness works and finds the mystic inaccessible gate and opens the immortal's golden door. Man, human, follows in God's human steps. Accepting his darkness, thou must bring to him light. Accepting his sorrow, thou must bring to him bliss. In matter's body, find thy heaven-born soul. Then Savitri surged out of her body's wall and stood a little span outside herself and looked into her subtle being's depths. And in its heart, as in a lotus bud, divined her secret and mysterious soul. At the dim portal of the inner life that bars out from our depths the body's mind and all that lives but by the body's breath, she knocked and pressed against the ebony gate. The living portal groaned with sullen hinge. Heavily reluctant, it complained, inert, against the tyranny of the Spirit's touch. A formidable voice cried from within, "Back, creature of earth, lest tortured and torn thou die." A dreadful murmur rose like a dim sea. The serpent of the threshold hissing rose, a fatal guardianhood with monstrous coils. The hounds of darkness growled with jaws agape, and trolls and gnomes and goblins scowled and stared, and wild beast roarings thrilled the blood with fear, and menace muttered in a dangerous tongue. Unshaken, her will pressed on the rigid bars. The gate swung wide with a protesting jar. The opponent powers withdrew their dreadful guard. Her being entered into the inner worlds. Which way are we going? Dana Lakshmi, you begin.
At first, out of the busy hum of mind, as if from a loud thronged market into a cave, by an inward moment's magic, she had come.
Mm. We know that busy hum of mind, no, with its voice that keeps going on and on, all the thoughts coming. So by this concentration which she made when that command came to her, the first thing that happens is that her being falls silent. She moves away from that busy humming mind. It's an experience like stepping out of a busy marketplace into a cave, a silent, empty cave. And that just seems to happen by magic, an inner moment's magic. Sometimes when we start on our search for the soul, we might get some kind of help like that, some peace or silence or some unusual experience might come. A loud, thronged market. It's full of people, and they're all talking. It makes that hum. It's happening within the mind. Mother often has described the mind as a marketplace, a bazaar, where there's coming and going and exchanging. Suresh.
A stark, hushed, emptiness became her self. Her mind unvisited by the voice of God, stirs her ear, while deeps them infinity.
So when that happens, everything becomes empty, hushed, silent, stark. There's nothing superfluous there. It's kind of bare and plain. And her mind is quiet. There's no voice of thought coming. It's just observing, the witness part of the mind. And what it sees is a deep void that seems to go on forever and ever. It seems to be infinite, no end to it. And it's dumb, it's silent, it doesn't express anything. Bhavana?
At heights receded, at depths behind a cloud. All fled away from her and left her blank.
Yes. So that though she'd been in touch with that higher level, that's where the voice had come from, no? But now it's as if they go further away. And the deeper parts of her being that she's been seeing, they're also as if they close their doors. She's just left completely blank. A blank page is one that has nothing written on it. Gumsun.
But when she came back to herself, her thought, once more she was a human thing on earth, a lone matter, a house of a closed sight, a mind compelled to think out even less. A life force passed into a camp of words, and the material world for limiting field.
So we may know this experience also, no? That we get into some kind of deep concentration, but then we come back and we are just like we were before. No? When we come back to our normal mental state, our self of thought, we find ourselves just again a human thing here on earth. Our body is a lump of matter. It's a house where all its windows are closed. There's no power of vision. A house of closed sight. And the mind, it is being driven to keep thinking out the ignorance, searching for knowledge, but never getting true knowledge. There we have a life force moving in us, but that also seems to be compelled somehow. It's been pressed into this limited field of action. It has to keep going. It doesn't stop. And our limiting field, the field that we are set into and which limits us, prevents us getting in touch with our heights and our depths, that is the world of matter. Tatiana.
Amazed like one unknowing, she sought her way out of the tangle of man's signal past that took the surface person for the soul.
So she's amazed, she's puzzled, like somebody who doesn't know where to go. She's looking for her way. She wants to get out of this tangle, this confusion of all the evolutionary past, which she saw, she was shown in the previous canto. No? And the result of that evolutionary past is a being who takes the surface person, mistakes the surface person for the soul. No? Now she knows that it's not the soul and that she has to go much deeper to find it, but she can't find that way. Mahalingam.
Then he voice spoke that dwelt on secret heights. For man thou seek not for thyself alone.
Please.
Only God assumes the human mind and puts on mortal ignorance for his cloak and makes himself a God with triple stride. Can he help man to grow into the God?
So it's the same voice that spoke to her before, no? A voice from the heights. It lives up there on those secret higher levels, and it's telling her, you are not doing this for yourself alone. You're doing this for the whole of humanity, for man, for the race of man. And it's only if the divine himself, herself, only if God assumes, puts on, takes on the human mind and puts on mortal ignorance for his cloak, disguises himself, covers himself with this mortal ignorance. That's the only way that he can help man to grow into his greater divine being. He has to make himself the dwarf with triple stride. If anybody knows this story, please put up your hand. It's one of the stories relating to one of the 10 avatars. In fact, it's the first human avatar. But that first human avatar comes in the form of a dwarf, a small being. So of course it is the Lord Vishnu, but he comes in this form, and he approaches a king who is ruling at that time. He disguises himself actually as a Brahmin, no? He's dressed in Brahmin's clothes. And he asks for a gift. Of course, those old kings, they always had to give gifts to Brahmins. No? He asks him for as much land as he can cover in 3 steps, 3 strides. So the king thinks that can't be very much, such a little being in 3 steps, how much land is he going to cover? So he immediately says yes. Of course, he would have had to say yes anyway, but he says yes. So the dwarf takes its 3 strides. With the first stride, he covers the whole earth. And the second stride, he covers the whole heavens. And then he turns to the king and says, where am I going to put my foot now? And the king bows his head and says, please put it here. So this is the story of the dwarf with triple stride. The divine disguising himself as a small, helpless, ordinary human being. But what he demands is everything. No, it all belongs to him, really. So this is what Savitri has done, in fact. She's an emanation or projection of the Supreme Divine Mother. But she has disguised herself. She's taken on the disguise of a human being. And now she's being told that you will have to go through the whole process like a human being. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It's only if you open the way. That's what comes in the next sentence, Joel.
As man disguised, the cosmic greatness works, and finds the mystic inaccessible gate, and opens the immortal's golden door. Man, human, follows in God's human steps.
Yes. So the cosmic greatness works, disguised as a human being. And in that form of the human being finds that mystic gate, which is inaccessible, very difficult to find. We are talking about accessible Auroville, that it should be easy to go everywhere. Something that's inaccessible is difficult to find, difficult to reach. So the divine in the human form finds that gate and opens the door of the immortal, the door to immortality. And then human beings can follow in the human steps that God has taken in the human form.
We give man and human. Are they different?
Actually, Aurobindo says yes. Man is the evolutionary link between the simple life forms, or we can say actually between the material world and the divine world. So he speaks of man being disguised as a worm or even as a clod of earth. This is all man. But when man reaches the human stage, then this work becomes possible.
This is an adjective,
Yes,
With his human limitation.
as a human being, yes. Harinana.
Accepting his darkness, thou must bring to him light. Accepting his sorrow, thou must bring to him bliss. In mother's body find the heaven born soul.
Yes. So this is what the voice tells her, that you have to accept the human darkness, no? And in that human darkness, bring light to humanity. You have to accept the kind of sorrow that human beings experience, and in that way you must bring to human beings bliss. And first, you have to find where your soul is. You have to find and unite with your soul in a human body, in the body of matter, in the physical body. Lela?
Then Savitri surged out of her body's wall and stood a little span outside herself, and looked into her subtle being's depths, and in its heart, as if in a lotus bud, divined her secret and mysterious soul.
Yes. So she is able to actually leave her body. This is the first time I think that she does it. No? With her consciousness, she surges out, she moves out of her physical body, the wall of her body, and she stands a little way outside the body and looks into the subtle being, looked into her subtle being's depths, the deeper levels of the subtle being. And therein she can sense, it doesn't say that she can see, she divined, she gets a feeling that in the very center of it, like in the center of a closed up lotus bud, no? She senses that her soul is there, her secret and mysterious soul. Sergei?
At the deep portal of the inner life that burst out from our depth to the body's mind, and all that
Lives.
but the body's breath shall not and pressed against the inner gate.
Yes. So there's a door in that wall of the body. There's a there's a door, the dim portal. There's not much light around that door. It's the entrance into the inner life. And what that door does, it makes a separation between the deeper levels of our being and our physical mind, our ordinary mind dependent on the brain, and every part of us that it lives only by the breath, the life force of the body. Those parts that are dependent on the body are not allowed to enter the inner parts. So we have to find out those parts of ourselves that can enter the inner worlds. We can't do it with our normal outer consciousness. So she finds that door and she knocks on it and she presses on it. It's an ebony gate. It's black, completely black. Joy, it would be your turn.
The living portal roamed with sudden hinge. Heavily reluctant, it complained inert against the tyranny of the spirit's touch.
Yes, I'm trying to understand about this gate. Of course, it's a borderline between our material being, our living physical body, and the immortal levels that are inside, no? So this door is actually somewhere in our bodies. There's some kind of a center here in our bodies. He says it's a living portal. It's a door or a gate which has life that is alive. And when she presses on it, it makes a noise. The hinges make a noise. We've got one door like that in Savitri, Bhavan, that makes such an awful noise when you the hinges groan when you pass through it. He says with sullen hinge, it means that they are unwilling to open. If you are sullen, you're in a bad mood, you don't want to do something. So that living portal complains. It doesn't want to move. It's inert. It's heavily reluctant. It makes itself heavy. It doesn't want to open easily and smoothly. It's complaining about the spirit's touch. It feels that pressure of her spirit on it. The spirit wants the door to open, and the door experiences that as a kind of tyranny, an unreasonable authoritarian demand. No, a tyrant is a despot, a dictator, a ruler who doesn't care about his subjects. He doesn't take care of them, and so they feel rebellious and revolting. So that living portal, it feels like that. Why are you coming and disturbing me? Tyranny. Inert. Inert means reluctant to move. Inertia is one of the basic properties of matter. No, it can't move by itself, it's inert. But sometimes we feel inert. You know, we wake up in the morning and the body doesn't want to move. Tamas. Yeah. So here this is an adjective also. The door is inert. Yes, sir. You read again?
Formidable voice cried from within, back, creature of earth, less tortured, untold thou that. A dreadful murmur rose like a dim sea. The serpent of the threshold hissing rose, a fatal guardian hood with monstrous coils. The hounds of darkness roared with jaws agape, and trolls and
Gnomes.
and goblins scolded and stared, and wild beasts roaring thrilled the blood with fear, and menace mattered in dangerous tongue.
Yes, these two words, growled and scowled. This ow sound like we have in bow. From the spelling in English, one is never sure, but it's... So she hears this formidable, powerful, terrifying voice crying from inside the door, telling her, "You're a creature of earth, you are made of matter, go back. If you enter here, you will suffer a great deal, and you will die if you enter here." That's what this door does. It keeps out all the material parts. So this is something you might have noticed, that when we begin to approach the inner worlds, we get a warning like that. Something warns us. Some fear comes that, oh, this is dangerous for me. So it's dangerous for our material parts, not for our inner parts. So when she hears a sound, a dreadful murmur rising up like a dim sea, a sea of darkness, and this doorway is guarded by a serpent. Serpents quite often guard doorways, no? They are energies which are there. They show themselves in this dangerous form in order to protect the doorway that they are guarding. No? So he's the serpent of the threshold. He guards that sill that we have to step over as we pass the door. He won't let just anybody pass. So he comes up like a gigantic cobra with a hissing, no? And he's fatal. He will destroy. He has a hood like a cobra and monstrous coils. He's huge. The coils, the circles of the snake. And then there are dogs there also, hunting dogs, hounds of darkness, who growl with their jaws agape, gaping open. They're threatening to bite. And there are these beings, small beings of the inner worlds, trolls and gnomes and goblins, and they make angry faces and angry eyes. No? Trolls are creatures, I think, from the Nordic mythology. They, during the day they look like boulders and stones, but in the night they can move around, and if they get hold of you they will maybe eat you. Gnomes are small beings who live underground, and goblins also. I don't know quite what is the difference between, maybe gnomes are smaller. If we read The Lord of the Rings, there are gnomes and there are goblins, aren't there? And trolls also, yes. Yeah. And she can hear roarings like wild beasts, lions and tigers. So the blood of the body is thrilling with fear, no? And she can hear also threats, menace, some sense that it's very dangerous now, that something terrible is going to happen. You menace somebody, you threaten them. So that's the kind of warning that comes when we want to enter into the subtle realms of our body, be within our body. Rosa.
Unshaken, her will pressed on the rigid bar. The gate swung wide with a protesting jar. The opening powers withdrew their dreadful guard. Her being entered into the inner
worlds. So Savitri is not deterred, she's not put off by all these threatenings. Her will continues to press on these rigid bars of that gate or door. And finally the gate does swing wide open, but it makes a noise, a protesting jar, that why are you forcing me to open? And these powers that have been opposing her, trying to prevent her from entering, they move away, they withdraw their guard, they allow her to enter, so she can enter into the inner worlds. In a narrow passage, the subconscious gate, she breathed with difficulty and pain and strove to find the inner self concealed in sense. Into a dance of subtle matter packed, a cavity filled with a blind mass of power, an opposition of misleading gleams, a heavy barrier of unseeing sight. She forced her way through body to the soul. So she has to pass, to get into the soul inhabiting the body, she has to pass through the gate of the subconscious. There's all kinds of things, conscious things going on inside our bodies that our mentality, our mind is not aware of. We call that the subconscious. The body just does all the things that it has to do without it having the instructions having to come from the mind. No? So there's a way, an entrance into that subconscious state. The mind can't pass through. It must be some other part of our consciousness. But there it's very stifling, it's difficult to breathe, painful to breathe. What she's trying to do is to find the inner self, the divine presence, which is hidden in the senses, in sense, in the nerves perhaps. No? She finds, so there everything is very dense. It's not, mind is relatively free, no? It can move freely. But here she finds her consciousness being packed, pressed, into this dense state of subtle matter. But there's also a cavity, an emptiness, but that cavity is filled with a blind mass of power. So that gives it a certain density. And that blind mass of power is opposing her. It is trying to prevent her. And in one way that it does that is by misleading gleams. It'll show something over here or something over there, but these are meant to mislead, to prevent her finding the way. Gleams of light. And there's also this heavy barrier in which vision seems to be blind. There's a power of vision there, but it's unseeing, blind. So she has to force her way through all that barrier of dense material power in order to get to the soul. So I think we'll stop there. The first section, the first of the inner countries that she comes to, it's this realm of the senses, the physical senses. And then the life, again, the physical life, the life force that inhabits the body. And then she comes to a level where the life is under the control of mind. So we can go back to the beginning and read these lines together. At first, out of the busy hum of mind, as if from a loud thronged market into a cave, by an inward moment's magic she had come. A stark, hushed emptiness became herself. Her mind, unvisited by the voice of thought, stared at a void deep's dumb infinity. Her heights receded, her depths behind her closed, all fled away from her and left her blank. But when she came back to herself of thought, once more she was a human thing on earth, a lump of matter, a house of closed sight, a mind compelled to think out ignorance, a life force pressed into a camp of works, and the material world her limiting field. Amazed, like one unknowing, she sought her way out of the tangle of man's ignorant past that took the surface person for the soul. Then a voice spoke that dwelt on secret heights. For man thou seek'st, not for thyself alone. Only if God assumes the human mind and puts on mortal ignorance for his cloak, and makes himself the dwarf with triple stride, can he help man to grow into the God. As man disguised, the cosmic greatness works and finds the mystic inaccessible gate and opens the immortal's golden door. Man, human, follows in God's human steps. Accepting his darkness, thou must bring to him light. Accepting his sorrow, thou must bring to him bliss. In matter's body, find thy heaven-born soul. Then Savitri surged out of her body's wall and stood a little span outside herself and looked into her subtle being's depths, and in its heart, as in a lotus bud, divined her secret and mysterious soul. At the dim portal of the inner life that bars out from our depths the body's mind and all that lives but by the body's breath, she knocked and pressed against the ebony gate. The living portal groaned with sullen hinge. Heavily reluctant, it complained, inert, against the tyranny of the spirit's touch. A formidable voice cried from within, "Back, creature of earth, lest tortured and torn thou die." A dreadful murmur rose like a dim sea. The serpent of the threshold hissing rose, a fatal guardianhood with monstrous coils. The hounds of darkness growled with jaws agape, and trolls and gnomes and goblins scowled and stared, and wild beast roarings thrilled the blood with fear, and menace muttered in a dangerous tongue. Unshaken, her will pressed on the rigid bars. The gate swung wide with a protesting jar. The opponent powers withdrew their dreadful guard. Her being entered into the inner worlds. In a narrow passage, the subconscious gate, she breathed with difficulty and pain and strove to find the inner self concealed in sense. Into a dance of subtle matter packed, a cavity filled with a blind mass of power, an opposition of misleading gleams, a heavy barrier of unseeing sight. She forced her way through body to the soul.